Hello, everyone, and welcome to Café New Canadians. This is a series where we have conversations around topics that matter to newcomers to Canada, those who are planning to move to Canada, and those who very recently arrived here and are learning to understand a little bit more about Canada, how to prepare for work and life here. In this session of Café New Canadians, we will be talking about navigating your career in Canada, whether you want to reconnect with your profession or you want to start fresh into a new field. And for that, I'm the moderator of this session. My name is Shruti Dargan, and I'm very pleased to welcome three experts joining us who will be sharing their insights and lots of advice for you in this session. We have with us Anjali Deo. She is a mentorship program manager at CRIEC, and Amy Koning, who is a manager of special projects and initiatives at Faculty of Continuing Education, Seneca Polytechnic. And we also have with us Daniel Wong, who is a coach and instructional designer. And we'll be sharing lots of career advice, more about bridging programs, mentorship, and lots more very shortly. A very warm welcome to all three panelists. And before we start chatting with them, let me just remind and tell everyone joining us that you are, of course, we welcome your questions today in this chat to make it as interactive as possible. So please share your questions with us on Zoom if you're joining us here using the Q&A tab, or on YouTube, if that's where you're seeing us, you can use the chat box and drop in your questions, and our experts would be very happy to answer those. Let's get started with the chat. Welcome, all three of you. How about a round of introductions so our attendees learn a little bit more about you? Let's get started with Daniel.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, everybody. So my name is Daniel Wong, and I have been supporting and coaching job seekers for a number of years. And these are job seekers at all different career levels, from new graduates and to people in management and everything, everyone in between, really. I've worked with people from all different industries, from supply chain to IT to finance and accounting. My experience working with newcomers and immigrants and international students have been my most recent years. I've helped start and facilitate a bridging program for newcomers. And most recent years, I've been working with international students. So it's my pleasure to help people adapt to Canada. There's so much to learn, and I encourage everyone to reach out to supports. There's so many supports like New Canadians, and yeah, it's a pleasure to engage in this conversation. There's always more to learn.
Thank you, Daniel, for joining us. We're excited that you're here with us. You've been a contributor in the past as well, sharing lots of career advice, and we're hoping for the same today.
Thank you.
Anjali, would you mind going next, please? A little introduction about yourself and your organization as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, everybody. My name is Anjali Deo. I am the program manager for the mentorship program here at CRIEC. So CRIEC is an acronym. It stands for Calgary Region Immigrant Employment Council. That's a long name, so we go by CRIEC. So we are a federally funded program that deals with newcomers to Canada. And within, like, newcomers to Canada is a broad group, but within that group, our program focuses on internationally trained professionals who are looking to re-enter the workforce here in Canada. And we support them through mentorship and networking, providing networking opportunities, connector meeting opportunities, and so much more. I've been working in this sector for about 8-9 years now, and it's very fulfilling. I'm an immigrant myself. I've moved to Canada 14 years ago, so it's wonderful to be able to support newcomers to Canada in their journey towards the success in their career path. So I'm happy to be here, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure our attendees will benefit from your advice. Amy, last but not least, a little bit about yourself, please.
For sure. Hi, thank you for inviting me. My name is Amy Koning. I manage special projects and initiatives at Seneca Polytechnic. Seneca Polytechnic is an academic institution in Ontario, but I'm here to talk about our special programs and how we have been delivering new programs for newcomers for over 15 years. I actually started my role as a career counselor, working with many Ontario job seekers to help them find meaningful work. Many unique programs have been developed and delivered over the years at Seneca to accelerate newcomers into professional careers. Most recently, we've been highlighting our occupation-specific language training programs, and there'll be lots more to share throughout this conversation.
Thank you for that. Now, I'm of course very excited to dive straight into the chat about how one can reconnect or restart their careers. But before that, I think it's important to highlight what are some typical challenges that newcomers face when they move to Canada. Of course, employment is one of their primary goals when it comes to their integration and settlement, but there are unfortunately some challenges that immigrants end up facing. Amy, would you be able to highlight, with your experience having worked with lots of newcomers, some key challenges that you think they face?
For sure. I think, it's been, again, working in this sector for a long time, working with newcomers and internationally trained professionals for a long time. We continue to hear that they report the lack of Canadian work experience as a challenge to securing employment. I think this has been well established. However, over the years, I think the definition has changed. I don't know if it's necessarily a single definition that can be attributed to it, but I think it's important to know that the concept has evolved, that it's not just like direct work experience in Canada, but it's also all of the soft skills that go with what employers are seeking in Canada. And being able to understand workplace culture, embracing diversity, and the ability to develop strong workplace relationships. So these are essential skills now required by a lot of employers here, not just for newcomers, but for job seekers in general, that these are skills that are very much highlighted by employers and in need. So it can become a challenge for a newcomer with, lacking, the understanding of the workplace here, how to job search, the expectations, and that's why there's a lot of supports available to help navigate all that.
Let's hear from Daniel and Anjali if they have something to add here. Daniel, I see you nodding. What would be another point that you can add here?
Amy hit all the points, and I just want to add to them. So from my experience, and I'm going to kind of step out and just talk about in general. I think identity is really important. And a lot of my clients who I supported who are, in mid-career, actually, a lot of them have come during mid-career. They've had a whole life before coming here. They've had a whole identity. They held titles and they made a certain amount of salary, and they come here and they have to redefine their identity. And how do you do that? It's like the most challenging. Identity is the root of who we are. So they have to adapt their new identity to a new culture and to adapt to new expectations. And it's really, really difficult to have to unlearn first and then
You're
learn.
so right. There's
Yeah,
so
the
much to
unlearning.
unlearn and so much to learn. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to that, those are the root things, right? You have to unlearn, and then you have to learn new attitudes and behaviors. And it doesn't come easy, and it requires support. So it requires support from others and listening to others, and it's a process. It's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a month or even a few months. It takes time, and it's different for everybody.
I'm confident that we'll be able to address that through this chat as well. Anjali, could I request you to maybe share a little bit, add on what Daniel just shared? This point around identity is very important for immigrants. And like he said, when we move with a certain level of expertise, experience that we come with, it's not always that you'll end up finding a job within that same field or within that same range that you were working in. And that could be a little depressing, it could be disappointing, and it's hard to kind of tackle that and then move on and still continue with job search, which would take time. Addressing these kind of challenges, what would you add, and if there's a solution that you can provide us?
I mean, there are excellent points made by Amy and Daniel both, and I completely agree with all of their points. And this is what we see on an almost daily basis when we deal with newcomers to Canada. When we talk to them, like, what are your biggest struggles? It tends to be around, that endless process of applying without a response. Then you start doubting yourself, no matter how accomplished you were earlier, and then you come here and most of the times the people coming here also come here from countries where everybody look like them, and they come here and now nobody looks like them. And they, and added to that is the other, piece of the fact that they're not getting responses to their applications. And then that's where self-doubt starts coming in. It's like, am I doing something wrong? Is there something lacking in my, resume, or, is that I'm not doing things right or whatever? These are some of the, common themes that we see across the board. And another, to add to what they said, those are all excellent points, is I would say the lack of having a network, a professional network, of course, but even a personal and social network. Many of the times the clients, we talk to them, they don't know anybody. They may know one person in all of Canada, and that person is way in the East Coast where we're in Calgary. So it's not a person that they can tap into on a regular basis. And they're just trying to navigate this thing of settling in a new country without knowing anybody, right? And just maybe they just came here with their spouse, and that's it. That's how many people they know. So that's another added layer to all of that. The identity piece is important because that's where that's the starting point for a lot of the newcomers that we see, right? Their social groups, the community groups around their, where they came from, those kinds of groups becomes the starting point of where they build that network out. So that's where they tap into first. They, meet people, build that connection, and then build that network that way. So yeah, that piece is important as well.
I'm hearing that networking, of course, is one way that, either you do it professionally, it could even be just connecting with people. As a newcomer, you're likely to make friends, meet neighbors, go to a public library, and then connect with people there. And all of that in some way or another is a form of networking, is a form of building connections and finding others who can probably help you down the line, or you can help down the line as well. So building on this, I'm going to come to Amy. What would be some tips as well? Now we're focusing on helping newcomers align their professional goals with also the requirements of the Canadian labor market to understand what is needed here. You mentioned soft skills earlier. What would be one quick tip that you can share for them to be able to overcome that challenge of identity or understanding what the Canadian workplace requires?
Well, I think, oh my gosh, there's so much to say, but credential assessments are really important. So, there's ways to get your credentials from overseas evaluated. An understanding of professional licensing is very important, and this can be complicated to understand. I even struggle with it myself, and I've been working in this sector for a long time. But luckily, there's government-funded services to support you before you arrive and when you are here. And it's essential to connect with them because they are experts and able to connect you with the path, the way, things you can do to understand the labor market in Canada. I think also language and strong communication skills need to be a priority. And then understanding the job search process in Canada, because it's probably completely different from where anyone's coming from. And, I'm sure we'll get more into that, but those are my three areas I think that are really important to grasp.
Thank you. And before I move on to Daniel and Anjali, I'd like to just mention, so Amy, you mentioned pre-arrival services that can often help immigrants who are moving to Canada before they arrive. There's help available in terms of orientation, understanding what Canada has to offer, and how to prepare for your life and thrive here. We actually, for all the attendees who are watching the session live, maybe joining us later, watching the recording, we'd like to tell you this May 23rd, we have a conference coming up, which is called Before You Arrive in Canada. And that is the conference to be at for free advice, to connect with more experts, such as what we have on the panel today, and lots of pre-arrival services as well that can help you understand and more about Canada. For the registration information, you can go to our website, or we'll be sure to drop the link towards the end of the session as well. But coming back to, of course, we'll have lots of help and resources available there, but also in this session. Daniel, you mentioned earlier with the identity piece, what would be a quick tip? Say if I'm a newcomer and I had 10 years of experience when I moved to Canada, and the advice that I'm receiving from career professionals is I may have to aim for a role that probably is a few years lower than where I was earlier. How can I navigate that without feeling disappointed with, I've brought so much experience, that's the experience Canada was looking for when I was invited as well. But then why is it that I can't use that experience and find a job that I deserve?
I think my first advice is don't undervalue yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that by really identifying what your value is. So there's a lot of talk about the importance of branding. Everyone understands branding, but when it comes to looking for a job as a newcomer, it's really, really important to define your own brand. You are your own brand. And what that means is like what people ask, what is a personal brand? A personal brand is what your values are and what you want to do based on your values. So if you stick to that, you really, really can't go wrong. And if you know who you are, then you're less likely to be, I guess, defined by someone else who doesn't know who you are. There's a lot of discrimination in the in employment and recruitment. It was always there. It's always going to be there, and it's wrong. Obviously, it's societal, and from societal perspective, it's wrong. But I believe it's every person's also responsibility to define who you are, because if you have a strong sense of who you are and the value you can bring to the table, then whatever people think you are or want to make you into, it doesn't matter so much. You tell people who you are. And there's a lot that goes into it. We're not going to go over that today, but I think understanding who you are and being proud of who you are. And another attitude to really adopt is really believe that what makes you different and unique is your superpower. It truly is. It's not a cliche. It really is. Most people who come to this country think that their accent or what they look like, what makes them different, what makes them appear different, perceive different is a detriment. That it's the wrong attitude. Really understand who you are. What makes you different and unique is what you can bring to the table. It is your superpower. And few years down the line, when you are working and successful and established yourself, you'll see that it's very, very true.
Thank you for sharing those words of positive words of encouragement in this case. I know I mentioned earlier that it could be frustrating if, of course, one isn't able to find a role that aligns with their previous experience, but there's also a learning experience there, which allows you to be able to find a role that could be somewhat related, and then you have your foot in the door, and then build your way up from there. Anjali, would you be able to maybe elaborate on this point?
I would say, having worked with newcomers a lot, one of the areas of focus would also be soft skills, focusing on your soft skills. A lot of the times, newcomers, they have their hard skills down pat. They're very highly qualified, many times overqualified, and but they certainly don't put as much focus or emphasis on soft skills, right? So, and also, certainly this I cannot emphasize enough is network. That
well,
is,
when you say soft skills, would you be able to also share some skills? What are some key soft skills that newcomers need to be able to exhibit as well?
There's many, but even understanding Canadian workplace culture and some of the kind of not rules, but kind of norms around it, and if you even the way that you give feedback, let's say the way that Canadians are famous for the sandwich feedback or whatever. Not a lot of the times I feel like newcomers are more direct and they'll say exactly what they want to say, what's on their mind, which is not wrong, honestly. For me, it's perfectly fine, but it could not work in a workplace setting, let's say sometimes. And so there's many things. And actually, if they approach programs like ours, there are workshops and things we do to actually work on those things and highlight those types of areas for them to work on as well, right? And then when I talk about networking piece, I cannot emphasize that enough, because if I had a time machine and I could go back to when I first came here, I would tell myself to network, because that is the one thing. And many times I feel like, and this is what I've told clients as well, it's not just to get your first break. In fact, at that point is when you might need to start networking more, is because now that you have a footing, you want to then, expand your network and meet more people in the sector that you're in or the profession that you're in, and let people know about you, right? And let people know that you are also a person who is new in the sector and is making a name for themselves or trying to, understand this profession more here in Canada. And building that network is going to pay dividends, not just immediately, but for a long time to come. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So, invest your time in networking, I'd say.
For sharing that. Now, again, when I asked the earlier questions, something I heard was lack of Canadian work experience as well, which could be local experience that a newcomer would lack as they move here. and they're looking to kind of build some kind of, it could be through volunteering, it could be through a job that you find in the first place. Amy, coming to you, there's also a concept called bridging programs, which some of our attendees may be aware of, others may not. Could you clear it out to them first, what bridging programs are, how are they different from academic courses, for example, and how can a bridging program be helpful when it comes to either if they're looking to reconnect with their profession in Canada for them to learn more about the field, or if they're looking to switch and reinvent their career here, they could also look at some new professions and a bridging program could still be relevant.
For sure. So bridging programs are basically designed to launch professionals, internationally trained professionals, into positions that match their skills, experience, and qualifications in the shortest time possible. So that's where it really differentiates from academic programs that are longer, more like diplomas and degrees and longer certificates, whereas these are designed with just in mind to give you the technical skills for the Canadian workplace, and then the wraparound supports that include, resume, interview skills, networking skills. They're usually occupation specific, and some are funded by the government. Some are privately funded. Some have student tuition. It varies across province to province, but they are available and designed for that specifically, where we're trying to launch you as fast as possible to reconnect with your career in Canada. So not all occupations are represented. It depends on each area, geographic area. It's important to research and probably connect with community service providers or settlement workers or employment advisors who can maybe tell you what's happening in the local community, and to navigate that information.
And would there be a workplace component as well as part of some bridging programs?
Yeah,
Are there
some bridging
internships, co-ops?
Some bridging programs have internships, some have co-ops to get you that experience. The most important thing is the employer engagement piece in bridging programs, so that there are employers connected to those bridging programs that are helping to guide either the community service provider or the institution or organization delivering it, to give you up-to-date information on what's happening in that occupation, through whether it's the hiring practices or the skills required, or how to bring some of that Canadian context into your international experience.
Thank you. Daniel, you mentioned earlier you were associated with the bridging program as well, wherein you were helping clients understand more about their profession. Would you mind sharing some anecdotes from there, or any learnings that you had from interactions with your clients?
So I worked with Mennonite New Life Center, and they are outstanding newcomer service provider. They have a number of bridging programs, and I was fortunate to start one of their bridging programs. It was for media and communications professionals, international trained professionals. So what Amy really listed was very, very accurate. There are a number of schools, a number of employment service providers and nonprofits that offer bridging programs, and I think the structure are very similar across most of them. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, well, which one should I choose, right? Choose the one, obviously, that is aligned with your industry. But if you want to really find the right one, go in and ask questions. Most of them, before you register, they offer information sessions. So you can ask all the questions you want. I would, ask questions like, what employers do you have connections with? Tell me about mentorship. How can you connect me with employers? How can you connect me with employers who can help mentor me and help me learn about the industry? And always find a program that has a successful work placement program, because at the end of every bridging program, most of them have like a workplace component, and that's where you apply all the skills, the soft skills, the knowledge that you learn in the program through a work experience. And those experiences sometimes lead to a job, a part-time job, or even full-time job later. There's so much values in bridging programs. It's really, as I mentioned before, it's helping change attitudes, helping in the process of learning, building connections, helping you understand what networking is and how to do it. because it's not a natural thing for people, especially for people who don't come from the Canadian culture, to do networking. And developing soft skills, which include communications, attitudes, behaviors, and just a great opportunity to learn about your industry.
That's great to hear. Now, you mentioned bridging programs are a great way to also build connections. Now, talking about connections, it could be networking, as Anjali highlighted earlier. It could also be that some bridging programs also have a mentorship component, wherein you would be matched with a mentor within the program or someone who works to represent the program, or it could be an external organization that helps with mentors in your field who can then guide you through your journey from their own experience and learnings as well. Anjali, I know that you work with such a program wherein there's mentorship involved, and you also highlighted networking earlier. In the context of bridging programs first, can you highlight how bridging programs not just connect you with, they don't just connect you with professionals and experts, but also other established immigrants or newcomers, like other newcomers who you can share your journey with and probably have similar experiences with as well. Starting with that and then moving to the mentorship aspect of it.
I personally have not worked on bridging programs myself, so I don't have firsthand experience of them. Whatever I know of them is just existing in the space of being a service provider for newcomers. But so I would just kind of keep it where Amy and Daniel have, because they have firsthand experience, and I wouldn't want to add something that's maybe inaccurate or not exactly correct. So, but I can definitely speak to the mentorship piece of things, and mentorship is a very, very key. It plays a very key role in building not just network, that's one part of it, but even confidence and just empowerment for the clients. Because when they see someone, because the mentors can be from a broad spectrum. Some were, let's say, newcomers to Canada once upon a time. Some were Canadian born and raised, and it could be a different spectrum. And when the clients connect with these people as mentors from someone in their field and understand the ins and outs, and get that guided advice, that's really valuable for the clients. I cannot tell you how many clients come to us and tell me, like I had a client come to me and tell me, "You changed my life." So it was just because we connected the client with, matched with a mentor, and the mentors in our program is matched based on professional background, so similar industry sector, that they've worked in, so they can give them that particular advice, and then also provide other opportunities to connect with other, people from similar professions. So it helps them to build their network, and the mentorship gives them very specific, tailor-made advice. It's not just like talking in broad terms. The mentor is going to talk about the client's specific background, specific, qualifications, and whether their qualifications are enough, or whether there's something that they might be looking at getting, like getting into a bridging program, for instance, or maybe getting verification of their, accreditation of their qualifications or whatever. In some cases, there's licensing requirements, right, for certain professions, and clients may or may not know those. So that's where the mentor can come into the picture, saying that, okay, this is a path that you can possibly take, and this will open up a lot of opportunities for you. Another case is where the professions don't exactly always translate. So your job may have been called X in your country, but it's not necessarily called as X in Canada, but it's still a very similar type of a job. But you need to now market yourself as this person, even though your earlier titles, and people don't really know how those things translate all the time, right? They don't really know. That's where a mentor can come in the picture and kind of highlight how they can market themselves effectively in that area. So mentorship, it goes a long way, and it also helps building that confidence that I talked about earlier, is when, when you've got a lot of rejections, when you've been applying and, apply, and no reply. And that's when it sort of knocks your confidence. And that's where we've seen mentors, how crucial they were in building that confidence for their mentees, that absolutely you can do this. You belong at this table. You belong at, you deserve a seat at this table. And, that goes a long way in helping that newcomer.
What I'm also hearing is whether it's mentorship or networking or bridging programs or any other format, this may not be a one-stop solution to all the problems that a newcomer might have in their employment or job search journey, but it definitely removes some of the barriers and smoothens that journey a little bit more, provides you that support from your peers, from experts, and makes that experience a little more comfortable. You feel like you're not alone in that journey. And with all of that support, you're able to thrive. You also mentioned that mentorship provides tailored support. And a component of that typically is also there's help with resume building.
Yes.
And you understand what a Canadian resume looks like, some mistakes to avoid that will cost you in your job search, or probably learning more about interviews. So very briefly, I know we have lots of such resources on our YouTube channel, across our website, but let's also touch upon very briefly some tips that you would like to share as experts, all three of you, related to resumes, Canadian style resumes, and interview tips that you have for our attendees today. Amy, I'll come to you very quickly for anything that you have related to interviews. Some tips, not just to kind of for mock interviews, but what kind of advice would you have for the communication aspect of it? And then Daniel, I'll be asking you more questions regarding resumes.
I'll do a little bit of both because
Sure.
it all goes together. The resume rules in Canada honestly have not changed since I've been working in career counseling for years and years and years. Keep it concise, focus on relevant experience, tailor each job resume for the posting, focus on achievements, proofread. It's exhausting, the job search process in Canada. Like it takes a lot of work. You can use AI now to quickly help you draft a resume, but you need to be careful that the text can be vague or maybe it might exaggerate some of your experience. So there needs to be a lot of double checking for accuracy. Strong interview skills. There's a lot of emphasis in Canada on interview skills. This is challenging for everybody. Employers have high expectations of how you present yourself. And so practicing over and over to help build your confidence is really important. And how do you make yourself stand out? I think the best advice is just to, show your enthusiasm, which is difficult if you're, not feeling that confident. But the positivity is really important here, and being open, to roles outside your goal is also key. So I think those are things to keep in mind, when you're starting to job search.
Certainly. Daniel, you mentioned earlier that, identity and branding, one's own branding and identity is so important. And so is it for to stay authentic to who you are as you communicate your value in any part of your job search journey. How can one do that in their resume? When we talk about you should be able to stand out with your resume while also staying authentic and communicate your value, all of this kind of somehow feels as if it's contradicting each other, as a newcomer, all of this can be overwhelming. What are some of your tips for this?
Well, just really to break down what a resume is. A resume is, it's facts, it's numbers. It's about your achievements defined by numbers, statistics, quantities, volume, and it's the keywords, right? So I think basic, if you don't know what to put on your resume, look at the job description and just highlight the keywords in terms of the communication skills requiring, leadership skills. I mean, and the performance, what they want you to achieve. If you've done that in your career, then put the same keywords in your resume. You could literally copy and paste, not the whole content of the job description, but just the keywords, right? Make sure that your resume mirrors the job description. And because when you submit a job online, usually it goes through a system, a computer system, basically, that screens your resumes. If it doesn't see the keywords that are on the job posting, it will basically cancel your resume. It won't go through the next phase. So tailor your resumes by putting the right keywords in your resumes. Make sure your resume, it's not your autobiography. It's not 10 pages, it's not 5 pages, it's 2 pages. Edit your resume so it fits within 2 pages. Everyone can do that. You have to put what's relevant in your resume, not everything you've done. Everything you've done actually goes towards a master resume. So I do encourage those of you who have longer resumes, do not throw them away. That is called your master resume. That's what you extract from when you write a resume that you actually send out to an employer. And keep in mind SEO. Make sure it's SEO friendly as well, so your resume can be searched easily by recruiters and employers. And then the resume is facts. The cover letter is where you can get more tailored and you could show more personality. A cover letter should be 1 page. It should be no more than 4 to 5 paragraphs. And this is where you explain a little bit more of your background, explain why you're interested in the company. Everything that's not in your resume, put in your cover letter. Really appeal to the employer why they should give you an opportunity. Covers your education a little bit, and some of the things you want to achieve in the organization that you want to work in. So these are the differences between a resume and a cover letter. They are not the same thing, but they work together to achieve, which is presenting you in a favorable way to employers to show why they should take a chance on you.
Thank you for sharing both Amy and Daniel, wonderful tips related to resumes, and you touched upon interviews as well. Anjali, anything you'd like to add specifically for once a person gets the resume right and you are able to bag an interview, then using the mentorship component, using all of the value that one has learned, communication tools, how can one excel or make a good first impression in the interview?
Certainly. And I think those were very, very important points, all of them great points across the board. Very practical advice there. And just one thing that I would add is highlighting your transferable skills in your resume is very crucial because, many times that, like I said, the job, the titles may not exactly translate. They may not sound exactly the same, or even the way that the job is structured may not look exactly the same in Canada, but you're still going to be able to bring your transferable skills, and you need to be able to highlight those effectively in your job, in your resume. And I cannot stress the importance of a cover letter enough. That was a very crucial point, and I was nodding heavily along with Daniel when he said that, because cover letter is, if you just submit your resume, it's as good as not submitting an application, honestly, especially if you're a newcomer, because the cover letter is where you will tell your story. Why are you applying for this job? Why do you want to work for this company? Why do you think you're a good fit for this role? What are you passionate about? All of those things, like telling your story, is where the cover letter will come into the picture. So you should be working on your cover letter just as much as the resume. And I know it's incredibly hard work. Having to tailor your resume for every time you are interested in a job is completely draining, especially if you're in job search mode and you're just applying. It's a lot of hard work, right? It's very draining, but it's still, that's the only way to go. There's no way around that, because that is the way that your resume will catch that attention and get that get noticed by the right people, let's say, right? And then coming to the interview side of it, the number one thing I can talk about is the STAR method, the behavioral style of interviews. I still see, even now, a lot of the clients are not used to that method, even if sometimes we do mock interviews with our clients if they have an important interview coming up. But even the mentors, I know that the mentors do mock interviews with their mentees when they have an interview coming up. And a lot of the times the feedback we get is that, that area needs stressing. And we do workshops. In fact, we have one coming up very shortly in a couple of weeks, where we're doing a workshop specifically about interview skills, and a focus piece is going to be on, behavioral style of interviews, because that STAR method and how to present your answers in the STAR format. And then also another key piece to highlight there is not talk about we, like especially what people who come from other cultures, it can be sort of bragging to almost, talk about like what I did. This is what I did. I achieved all this, but the interview is the place where you highlight everything that you did. And then that's also an unlearning that people have to do, is then don't talk about we. I don't want to hear what we did. I want to hear what you did. So talk about I, right? Tell me exactly what you did. So that's another piece that is very crucial, is that to tailor your answers in the way that in the STAR format, and also talk about what your specific contribution was to those results that you're claiming in your answers or in your examples. So I think that is an important piece of the interview technique as well here in Canada.
I'm sure our attendees today will feel a lot more confident with their resume and interview preparation for the next opportunities that they're applying for. But with this, now so far what we've discussed touches upon, if a person moves with their experience, internationally trained professionals or educated professionals, when they're looking to reconnect with their profession. Now, something that was mentioned earlier was, with each application, you need to tailor your application and your resume to the role that you're applying for. Say, for example, I moved with media experience, but I'm looking to kind of now pivot and get into client servicing. It's not something particularly that I may have done in my job role. But coming back to, Anjali, when you mentioned transferable skills, what would be some of your tips? And anyone can take this question, because this is a repeated question we get from our viewers as well, which is, when I'm trying to apply for slightly different jobs than what I've done in the past, how do I explain that I do have those transferable skills? I am qualified for it, but because I don't have examples to show or I can't quantify my experience, how do I still communicate that? Whoever would like to take this. Any quick tip?
I can start.
Sure.
Well, I know everyone else will jump in. To transition to new industries requires a lot of effort. You need to be clear about the specific role you want to transition to. You need to understand your transferable skills. You might need to upskill or add some sort of credentials to your background, maybe micro credentials, some short training, just to top up some of the experience or some of the industry sector needs. And then you need to rebrand your job search portfolio, your LinkedIn portfolio to really highlight some of those relevant accomplishments for transitioning from one to another. And I think like the most important is, to understand why. Right? To understand why are you transitioning? Like, why are you, is there a reason? Is there a story? Is there a passion? And you just want to make sure you have that, in your mind, because that might come up in interviews or, I think employers might want to hear that, as to why are you leaving one occupation to go to another?
What would be some skills? If Daniel, I could come to you when someone is looking to kind of rebrand their career or pivot, or maybe stay within the same field. For example, someone who's worked in journalism is now looking for a marketing role. It would still somewhat be in the space of media, but it's not exactly the same role, or advertising. What would be some skills that one can use to kind of pivot slightly or completely change careers and maybe get into a skilled trades job in the future? Because there's also, Canada as a country is focusing on these high, more in demand professions. And there's a lot of need for newcomers, for people in Canada to be moving to those professions as well. So what would be some quick tips for skills that they need to be able to make that change?
It's funny you mentioned that example going from journalism to communications. I actually was able to support someone through the bridging program who actually made that transition. She was a experienced journalist in her country. She came here and she said, I want to do something else. I want to do something else. I want to work in communications. And she did that successfully by really sitting down, making a list of her transferable skills, right? Her biggest transferable skill is writing. You're writing as a journalist, you're telling stories. And when you're working in communications, even in PR, you're telling a company's story, you're telling an individual story, you're representing them. And it's writing someone's story. So it requires writing. Writing is writing, whether you're a journalist or in communications or PR. So she was able to identify that as her biggest skill, and she really capitalized on that. And that's how she branded herself. And she was able to, she stayed on track, she stayed on brand, and she never forgot that. And even she had many, many no's, people telling her in communications, you were a journalist, what does that have to do with communications? She stuck to who she knows what she did, which is her strength was writing and communications and talking to people and listening to people. And she made a very successful transition. Another important transferable skill that I wanted to talk about is leadership. So I'm sure there are many folks out there today who were managers, who are actually managers or were managers, and coming to Canada, it's not realistic to apply for a management position because you have to work your way up. And as a manager, you get perceived as overqualified, and then you get canceled, right? So what's a manager, right? A manager is a leader. What's a leader? Make a list of what truly is what a leader does, right? It's not a title. Leadership is not a title. Leadership is about serving and listening to your team. Basically, you're a team player. You're a strong communicator. You are a problem solver. You also can go back and problem solve based on all the experience you have as a leader. So someone who doesn't have a leadership skills doesn't know how to solve problems as someone who has leadership skills. Every organization wants a leader, wants to hire someone, even like a junior associate. They want someone who may be very young in their
With leadership
career
qualities, yes.
to know how to solve problems, right? So if you were a manager and know how to deal with people, different personalities, resolve problems, you could take the leadership title off your resume, but in the resume, certainly list that you have worked with people, resolved problems, worked with different personalities. You know how to resolve problems. You resolve conflict. You've been in different situations and you know how to handle them. That's leadership. And so it doesn't matter if you have 10 years of experience as a senior manager and you're applying to a junior associate role. You could, maybe you could like kind of dial down the big titles that you've held, but definitely list what the impact you have in your organization as a problem solver, someone who works well with people. Those are true leadership skills. And so
I'm hearing
leadership
like breaking down the bigger qualities into more bite-sized,
really
understandable.
distilling behind the title, what
Mhm.
is your job? And that is how you identify transferable skills. We get so carried away with titles. Don't get carried away with them. It's everything behind the title is what you should focus on.
That's a great tip to, I think, move to Anjali with. Anjali, what would you add when it comes to transferable skills, when it comes to pivoting, or when it comes to completely rebranding, moving into a whole different profession? What would be some tips that you can share, having worked with newcomers, having heard their challenges, or success stories that you've witnessed as well?
I mean, one of the key things would be to focus on the things that skills that are common across the board. Even if you're completely radically changing career paths, let's say, and there's really nothing common on the hard skills end, but there will still be things such as meeting tight deadlines, let's say, or research and analytical skills, or using multimedia, or time management, or working in a team setting, or there's endless things, adaptability. Like there's going to be many things like that we probably don't even give much of a thought of, that the fact that we've done it, or we have those skills, or have acquired those skills in the course of our work experience, right? And so that's the piece that I would focus on. And then in the cover letter is where I would explain, why am I making this pivot? What has sort of compelled me to apply to this? Or why am I feeling pulled to apply for this role or this company? Or what is it that sort of excites me about this opportunity, right? And then that's where you make your case. And in the resume, you talk about actual skills, like things like what I just mentioned: communication, even maybe some technical things, like maybe there's some particular softwares that they want experience in, which you actually have experience in, even if you haven't worked in that field, let's say. Or something as generic as project management. It doesn't have to be, maybe you were in a different field, but project management is project management, and those tools can still be applied across the board in other sectors or other fields as well. So that's something that you can focus on. And then in your cover letter, you can talk about why you want to make that transition and make that case for yourself.
Very quickly, let me bring up a question that we received earlier before this session, which is more around, gaps in the resume as well. Oftentimes, when someone moves as a newcomer, we might rely on survival jobs, quick jobs that one can find to just earn a living as you're looking for your meaningful, desirable job. In that process, say, let's use an example of someone who's worked in the retail space and now has found a job in accounting or something else that they were looking to and they have previous experience in. As they apply for accounting jobs or as they apply for marketing jobs, for example, would it be fine for them to leave out the retail experience that they have because it's not suitable to this job that they're applying for? And would that not create a gap on the resume? How to navigate that as well? Amy, would you want to go for it? Or Anjali, I see that I think you're trying to answer.
I'm okay with
A very
it.
quick
Who
tip.
wants to
So
go first?
Anjali,
Yeah,
let's get started with you and then I'll jump to
sure. Yeah. So I think the up to a year is still acceptable if you've moved to a new country and you're settling in, and that's a reasonable time frame. I don't think you can easily explain that away in an interview, saying that I was in the process of moving to Canada, so just settling in and getting my ducks in a row and then starting my job search. It's taken that long. You could still leave it out as a gap in your resume. If it's up to a year, but once it starts getting over a year is when you would want to put something in a resume to show for it, to explain what that big gap is, why that big gap is there. And then it's case to case. I think it's up to each person if they want to talk about their retail. It's not necessarily going to knock points off of your, if you're a good candidate and you're good at what you do and you're able to present that in an interview, the fact that you worked in a retail job is not going to be the reason that you were not hired. So, but it's, I would say I would leave that to the individual. Up to a year, it's still okay. It's still like we've had people apply at our organizations who've moved from other places and have been like, you know, let's say 3 month, 4 month, 5 month period of a gap, and it's perfectly okay. They say that we were in the process of moving, it's acceptable. You understand that there's a, you know, something that goes with it, right?
For sure. Amy, with you're someone, of course, having worked in the bridging space, in the academic space, you've come across many resumes, you've supported individuals with their resume building as well. What would be some tips that you would add for what kind of experience to indicate on a resume, how to be able to actually make that pivot and showcase one's value in as they apply for jobs?
Yeah, I think just going back, I totally struggle with this one. Like, I think it's really a tough one, and I'll be interested to see what Daniel has to say. You know, to be, you know, you're a professional accountant, you come to Canada, but then you get a survival job. Do you put it on your resume? Do you leave it out? There's benefits to putting it on, there's benefits to leaving it out. Employers are so, you know, we're not sure what they're thinking all the time. You know, we're not sure what they view that as. You know, for me, I see it as a positive. You know, you're now integrating into the Canadian labor market. You're being able to learn new skills. Yet some other hiring managers may not see it the same way. So I think it's a really tough decision, and that's where I value working with employment advisors, you know, who can kind of just dig down with you to look at to do that or to not do that. I think is good to have a brainstorm with someone and just talk about the pros and cons.
Certainly. I, for one, think that it kind of speaks to your flexibility and adaptability as well. But Daniel, what would you add?
I think two suggestions. One is that there are different resume formats, right? So there's the chronological format, which presents your career in a chronological way. So if you've been in the same career your whole career and you haven't done anything else, that's a very effective way to present a succession of promotions and growth in one field, right? But if you have worked in accounting for 8 years and you come to Canada and in the meantime you need to find a job and you're working retail, then number one, I would use a functional resume format, which really focuses less on, it doesn't focus on like the presentation of chronological by dates, your career and your choices and the companies you work with. It focuses on the skills and your qualifications. So the choice of format, how you write your resume is very, very important. Another suggestion would be, I actually give this a suggestion to a lot of my clients, is that don't discount a customer service job if you worked in finance for your whole career and you just need to work. Canadian experience is Canadian experience. It really fills in the gap and it shows that you are employed and employable, which is very valuable. So you can do that, but you can also do it in a way that doesn't confuse employers. So my advice in someone in that situation, for someone who's worked in accounting for 8 years, is that list accounting under primary career. That's one section in your resume. And list all the finance and accounting work that you've done. And then below that, list other employment. That's another section, other employment. And that's everything else but your finance and accounting work, which includes retail. It could include customer service. So it doesn't confuse the employer. Like they're not thinking that after 8 years, this person wants to work in retail. If you present it that way, it is confusing. But if you put the different types of employment in different categories, one is primary employment and another one is other employment, it includes all the employment. It does not confuse, it will not confuse the employer. And it includes all the employment. So they will look at the dates and see that, okay, there is no gap in the resume. And they probably understand that this person took this job as a survival job and also credits their resilience, that they're just willing to work while they're looking for a professional job. That's two pieces of advice I would give.
And that's two very great pieces of advice to understand the main difference between the two kinds of resumes, because that's a problem solved, honestly. when it comes to so many individuals moving with different kinds of experience, having taken up different kinds of jobs as well. I'm sure it's something that helps a lot of our attendees and viewers who will watch this later. Amy, very quickly, I'll come to you with a question that we received as well, which is more around the need for upskilling. So learning, of course, as a newcomer, as a job seeker, as someone who is an employee, there's always learning on the job, and especially now with more advanced technology, AI, and so on, there's always need to upskill. As someone who's in the academic space, can you highlight the need for certifications, courses, even bridging programs that way, that kind of elevate, enhance one's value as a job seeker and make one more employable? Very quickly, in about a minute, if you could share that.
Okay, let's go fast. I mean, I highly, for professional development, like, and certifications, I highly recommend occupation-specific language training after you're past the lower level language levels to really, connect with those types of courses that will help you learn essential workplace skills and help you with job search and interview strategies. Then there's like obviously a number of LinkedIn learning courses that you can take on your own. You can get free LinkedIn learning through as a student or through libraries, and you can help to support your soft skills development. Now, the new trend around here is micro-credentials, which are, again, short bursts of training, really developed with employers who give input into academic institutions on, a certain specific skill, which helps you to stay current in your sector or industry. And all of this just shows you're really committed to continuous learning. And with AI, of course, at least have some general understanding at this point. You can find a lot of free learning as well on just seminars on AI, intro to AI. Not all of us are experts yet, but it's important to start to grasp the concepts.
Thank you so much for sharing that. With very little time left, I think now I'll just come back to all of you for your one last final piece of advice that you have. It could be encouragement for newcomers who are in the journey of looking for jobs, could be disheartened with the process right now, or are just looking for a little bit of encouragement, practical advice. Starting with, let's start with Amy and then.
Sure. I'll keep it short. I mean, I have a word of the year every year, so my word of this year is believe, which I think resonates with all of us. We just all need to believe. Don't stop believing just because we're having a tough time, just because things seem tough out there right now. Sometimes we all feel overwhelmed, but just keep believing there will be successes and better days.
That is amazing. Daniel? Very quickly, one quick tip that you have to share.
My answer is ChatGPT. It's amazing. I'm a late adopter, but I think most people with the resume writing, cover letter writing, it's a drag. And you know what? It is. It can be time consuming. And I just recently discovered in the last year, like using ChatGPT is brilliant, right? So I'm not advocating for people to copy and paste everything from ChatGPT into your resume or cover letter. When I write a cover letter or a resume, I look for a resume or cover letter in ChatGPT, like a sample, and then I use it as a framework. And then I look at my resume and cover letter, and I pick pieces like that works and just embed it into my current resume or cover letter. I tailor it to really my life, my story. But you certainly don't want to copy and paste it, but certainly gives me great ideas of how to phrase certain things and terminology and the words and what order to put it in a letter or resume and how to format certain things. It's truly brilliant.
ChatGPT as your best friend who's sitting next to you and kind of just sharing words of advice and maybe some guidance that you can pull into your
Now,
resume.
I'm not advocating for plagiarism, but I'm using it as a tool, as a framework, and it's a huge time saver. I mean, it really is. I know it sounds cliche, but it really is. It will save you time because you still need to write the resume. You still need to write the cover letter.
I couldn't agree with you.
There's no like a way around it, but you can save a lot of time with a tool like ChatGPT.
Certainly. Anjali, very quickly, in about 30 seconds, any last tips that you have?
Sure. Great points covered. Just to add, I would say, probably as a newcomer, be aware of all the resources that are out there. There's a lot of resources for your benefit. There are a lot of organizations like ours and others across the country, everywhere, and they're offering a lot of free services that you can access. So resume advice is one, interview skills, even events and things that you can access where you can build your network, meet other people, access mentorship and such other things. And it's difficult, but I have seen firsthand how connecting with other newcomers who are in a similar boat as you really, really helps in going a long way in boosting that confidence. So yeah, access those resources, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists and thank you to the attendees. The fact that you joined this session shows that you've taken that initiative and you're working towards bridging the gaps in your job search as well. This was a session of Café New Canadians that's brought to you by New Canadians TV Network. We have lots of advice on our website and other resources that I will share very shortly. On your screen is information about CRIEC and also Seneca. The two organizations that Amy and Anjali represented. And Daniel is someone who's very helpful over LinkedIn as well. So we would encourage that you reach out. And with that, a very warm thank you to, of course, everyone who joined us. As I mentioned earlier, with New Canadians TV Network, there are multiple ways of you connecting with our content. If you're in Canada, you can also watch us on TV. We have a TV show that airs on Omni Television, and our website and YouTube channel have a bunch of resources for you for all parts of catering to all areas of your journey in Canada as a newcomer. Thank you once again, and we'll see you in the next session. Have a good one.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Shruti and Daniel.
Thanks for the opportunity. Great to meet everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for